That's how fast your stove can become a hazard because of the absence of this simple little bracket that's supposed to be installed on the back of all electric and gas ranges. It's an easy-to-install device that bolts down to your floor or wall. You then slide your stove legs into it to prevent it from tipping over. Manufacturers and the government recommend all stoves be bolted down, but it's not mandatory. The consumer advocates at Public Citizen say that's why so many brackets are left off, leaving stoves prone to tip over.
I'm here today to talk about killer stoves.
Joan Claybrook held a news conference to appeal to manufacturers, retailers, and the government to fix the problem that she says has been going on for over 25 years.
We don't know the full extent of it because a lot of people don't report it, but we know that there have been at least 26 deaths and almost 100 injuries.
Like this bad burn in 1995 with a 1.5-year-old little boy. His mother says her son's skin was literally burned off his legs from a boiling pot of chicken soup. The mother of the burned child called into the news conference to describe her son's horrific ordeal.
It was the horrific thing you could ever imagine your child going through, watching your child going through, seeing the painful procedures that they have to go through in the hospital.
Her boy's almost 15 now and still faces more skin grafts.
Most homeowners who purchase the ranges don't know that the units are not secure and are unaware that the brackets are necessary.
We asked the Association of Home Appliance Manufacturers for comment. They told us manufacturers provide with every new range an effective and reliable anti-tip device that can be easily installed. It is up to the installer and the consumer to act.
Approximately 15 to 20 million kitchens in the United States are equipped with a range that can tip over and crush, scald, or burn whoever is standing in front of it. According to documents from the Consumer Product Safety Commission and the national retailer Sears, manufacturers and the government have known about this lurking danger for more than 20 years. Since the early 1980s, manufacturers of ranges began using lighter gauge steel to reduce cost, even though they quickly learned that this resulted in a tendency for the lighter weight appliances to tip over when weight was applied to the oven door. Most stoves made before the 1970s or 1980s were too heavy and sturdy to easily tip over. After receiving numerous reports of severe accidents caused by tipping stoves, Underwriter Laboratories and the American National Standards Institute both developed national voluntary safety standards that require electric and gas ranges manufactured after 1991 to remain stable when 250 pounds of pressure is applied on the oven door for more than 5 minutes. The standards also require sellers to install anti-tip brackets that manufacturers agreed to supply, but the retailers rarely install the brackets. While the retailers are all aware of the safety hazard, the delivery people they contract with are often not equipped or trained to perform the installation service, and the salespeople rarely mention the issue to the buyer. As a result, most homeowners who purchase the ranges do not know that the units are not secure and are unaware that the brackets are necessary for stability. Sears, one of the largest retailers of gas and electric ranges, admitted in an internal memo in 1996 that the brackets were installed for only an estimated 5% of ranges sold, and possibly as low as 2 to 3%. In a 1999 letter to Sears, Underwriter Laboratories informed the retailer that it expected the ranges with the UL listing mark to be installed with the anti-tip safety brackets supplied by the manufacturers. After more than 100 deaths and severe injuries caused by household stoves that tipped over onto people, Sears, Roebuck and Company, one of the number of companies that sold and installed these stoves, agreed to a major recall that cost the retail giant as much as $546 million and covers nearly 4 million households. The CPSC was aware of the oven tipping problem since at least 1984 and received reports detailing numerous deaths and serious injuries, mostly involving children and the elderly. By 2007, it had not taken any steps to require notification to owners the installation of the brackets, or redesign of the ranges in the future. Unfortunately, the lawmakers charge some installers, retailers, landlords, and others fail to install these brackets. As a result, there are incidents each year involving children in which stoves are stood on or climbed upon, causing it to tip. In this insider-exclusive Investigative Network TV special, our news team visits with Matthew and Rebecca Freeman, partners at the law firm of Freeman and Freeman, to go behind the headlines to see how they got justice in a record-breaking $19 million verdict in Killer Stoves in Your Home, What You Need to Know. They will show you how manufacturers, installers, and building owners and management companies each share legal responsibility in stove tip-over accidents, depending on the circumstances. Manufacturers have known since the 1960s that their anti-tip bracket solution to their unsafe design problem in their stoves wasn't working. Qualified stove installers have a strict professional duty to properly install the anti-tip brackets included with any new or used range. Unfortunately, the home appliance industry has discovered that for numerous reasons, proper installation is rare. In any case, stove installers can and have been held liable for their negligence in these cases as well. Building owner negligence can also be a factor in stove tip-over accidents. To save money, owners of residential apartment complexes, duplexes, and other rental properties will do maintenance themselves, use unlicensed and unqualified people to do it for them, or try to have it done on the cheap by telling installers not to use the stove brackets. In some cases, retailers have informed installers that the anti-tip brackets are unnecessary. Matt and Rebecca have earned the highest respect from citizens and lawyers alike as two of the finest trial lawyers in Northern California and across the nation. And because of that, they are driven to fight for people who have been harmed by the willful or negligent actions of others. Their amazing courtroom skills and success rate continue to provide their clients with the results they need and the results they deserve. This is the Insider Exclusive, live from Santa Rosa, California. It's my great pleasure to introduce Matt and Rebecca Freeman to the show. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Hi there. Tell our audience a little bit about your law firm. What kind of law do you practice?
We are a plaintiff's firm. We represent the small guy. We represent people who usually have been injured through no fault of their own, and usually they're people who don't have a lot of money and they need help.
My question to you, Matt, is this. Insurance companies probably have more lawsuits in the courts than any other industry around. They pay big bucks. So why do you choose to represent the little guy against these behemoths that have so much money?
Well, Steve, every courthouse has two doors to it. And one of those doors is the door that the people with money, the insurance companies, the corporations, people who can afford $400 and $500 an hour, they walk in that door and they get an attorney and they get access to the court system. The door that our clients walk through, on top of it says contingency. And that's the door where you don't need any money to get in. You come in there and we partner with our clients and we rise and we fall with our clients, and you get access to the justice system, and you don't need $400 an hour. And those are the people we represent.
Right. Today we are here talking about a case that went on for years and years and years, not just your case, but in an industry where the manufacturers and the installers and the building maintenance people and all these other folks that were involved with this type of installation of stoves chose not to do anything about it. And because of that, lots of people died. Lots of people were injured. Later on, we'll have on this show two of your clients who have to remain anonymous per your settlement in this case, but we'll talk with them a little bit about their experiences and what they went through. Tell our audience a little bit about the facts of this case.
Well, Steve, the appliance industry has known for years, since the 1970s, that they have a big problem with their freestanding 4-burner stoves, the typical stove you would see with an oven underneath it. And those stoves tend to tip over since they're not made of cast iron anymore.
These are usually smaller stoves, aren't they?
They are. They're the stoves that you would see in an apartment house, 4-burner oven underneath. And since the 70s, they're lightweight, stamped metal. What happens is children or grandma will open the oven door and put weight on it, and that stove then tips forward, and the injuries are catastrophic. Grandma will be trying to take the roast out and set it down in the oven door because it's heavy, and then the stove will tip forward, and she actually gets trapped between the oven and the door, and she's cooked alive. It's horrible. And then children will want to see what mom's cooking or climb on the counter, and they will step on the oven door, the stove tips forward, and anything that's cooking on top just tumbles over them, and they're horrible burns.
And in your case, we're showing some photographs that you gave us about what was the end result of this stove tipping over, you know, the damage that was done. Tell our audience a little bit about the people you represented. What happened to them?
We represented 2 children who, when this happened, were 4 and 5 years old. They were cousins. It was Christmas holidays. Moms were cooking a huge pot of stew on the oven. The children were playing. It was a very small apartment, and the kids went up, opened the oven door, and started to step on it. They wanted to see what was cooking. It smelled good. And as they put a little bit of weight on the oven door, the entire stove tipped over, and tragically that entire cauldron of boiling soup fell all over the children.
What was when your clients first came to you, okay, what was when you did an examination of how you're going to proceed in this case, what were the final results in terms of the injuries to the children?
The little girl suffered from terrible scarring over 90% of her body, really. Fortunately, her face was spared, but she lost her nipples and had horrendous scarring and disfigurement. But what was even worse than that was that in order for her to endure the treatment, which requires debriding of the skin, they had to induce her to go into a coma because it was such a painful treatment. And as a result of the long time of being induced in a coma, she suffered permanent brain damage, and she'll never be mentally the same either.
The economic cost of taking care of your client for the rest of her life is quite expensive, isn't it? What does it come out to be about?
Well, in our case, the little girl had a life care plan that included all her future treatments that she would need, future operations. She needs 24 hours supervision and will for the rest of her life. That all came out to just under about $20 million.
Yeah, and the young boy, he wasn't as badly burned, but it was expensive too.
Well, he wasn't luckily as badly burned, but he still had 3rd-degree burns over 30% of his body or more. So he had it on his feet. He lost several toes. He had several operations to correct so he could walk properly, and he needs several more. So the settlement will get him the money to have the care he needs.
Now, your whole case is this whole thing could have been avoided if certain things were done. And one of the things that we found very interesting in your case was the president of the property management company had written a letter to the LA Times, which we have. He was the president.
Yes, it was.
Talking a little bit about the dangers of some of these stoves and the lack of what's called an anti-tipping device, basically securing the stove to the wall, and the fact that the majority of these stoves didn't have it. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, Steve, every box that the stoves come in, the manufacturer puts an anti-tip bracket. That was their solution to the problem because the stove was poorly designed. They took an 80-cent bracket, threw it in the box and said, you got to put this on the wall or the floor so the stove doesn't tip. In these 288 units of apartment that had the kitchen remodels, not a single one of those brackets was installed. It's important to remember that we are not talking about just a mom and pop down the street who own one building. The owner of these buildings, they own 5,000 or more apartments in California. And the management company manages over 10,000 units in California. These are professional management and owners, and they knew better. But they didn't train, they didn't supervise, and they didn't qualify their employees. And it took too much time for the employees to install these brackets, so they just threw them out. And we took depositions of many, many people. The supervisor of the remodeling crew told us, well, I just threw those brackets out. And he made a gesture like that. It was too much trouble to put them in, so we threw them out.
And they should have known better, because the owner of the company, his own nephew, had been killed in a stove tip-over accident 10 years before this happened to our children.
Right, and we have a letter, I think it was 1994, a letter that he wrote to the LA Times alerting people, and we're showing it right now, that he was aware of these dangers. Now you would think that the captain of the ship would pass down the urgency to everybody working for it, but that wasn't done, was it?
It was not done. Despite the fact that the president of the management company had written the LA Times and said, my nephew was killed in a stove tip-over accident, and I want everybody to know that you have to put these anti-tip brackets in so that the stove can't tip forward. Kids step on the door, and bad things happen. And despite that, despite him writing that letter, and he had articles in the real estate journals and such, his company didn't install a single bracket in one of the 288 units that they remodeled.
And they also threw any of the warranty materials out that cautioned people that they should have this anti-tip bracket, right?
They did.
Right. And this was called renovation, wasn't it?
It is. They did 208 renovations. They did not install a single bracket, even though those brackets came in the box with a big warning that said, if you don't install these, bad things will happen.
Okay, why didn't they fix this problem? I mean, they knew it was a problem, but why didn't they do it?
Well, Steve, actually there's two problems. One problem is that the installers weren't qualified, they weren't trained.
They are that way because they're cheaper, right?
Well, that's correct. But there's two problems here, Steve. The other is the manufacturer.
You know, who we are not allowed to disclose.
That's correct, but it really doesn't matter. This happened to be one of the world's largest appliance manufacturers. But it's an industry-wide problem. The industry made a decision years ago that it was cheaper to put an 80 or 90 cent bracket in the box than to make the stove safe and redesign it. In fact, most of these manufacturers had patents, our manufacturer here did, that they applied for that would have fixed the problem. But they took those patents and they put them in the bottom of the drawer and they never used them.
And what was especially offensive is that in our case, when our manufacturer applied for that patent, they said, this patent is necessary because we know that the anti-tip brackets don't work because we know that nobody's installing them.
And so there were two entities you were suing, basically. You're suing the manufacturers, and you were suing the building owners, the installers, right?
Not the individual installers, just the property owners, the property managers, and the manufacturer.
Discuss some of the problems that ensued in suing, let's say, the property owners, the managers. What kind of problems did you run into in this particular case?
Well, Steve, one of our big concerns was that the jury would blame the mothers. They would say, you know, I wouldn't let my kids in the kitchen. I don't let my kids near the stove. It wouldn't have happened to me. But we do focus groups on every case. We do mock jury panels. And we found that when the focus groups and the mock juries heard that there was no drugs, no alcohol in the home, they were sitting at a table right next to the kitchen playing a wholesome card game, and the mothers were right there. And then when they found out that the manufacturers knew how to make a safe stove but didn't, and when they found out that the building hadn't installed a single bracket in not one of the units, we found that there was no blame put on the mothers.
From the time that you took this case on to the time you were supposed to go to trial? Because this case settled before you went to trial, right?
Shortly before trial.
What time period was that? With all your discovery and investigation, et cetera, how long did that take?
It was about 3 years.
3 years. And you settled the case. Can you say why they settled with you?
I think they settled with us because they knew that we were going to win. By that time, we had taken 30 depositions. We went to a mediation and showed them little video clips from the depositions of what their own people were saying, their own guys saying, we just threw them out. And shockingly enough, we went to the same apartment complex and found a grandmother whose grandchildren were living with her, and we went in that apartment complex and looked at her stove, and that stove still did not have an anti-tip bracket. It was still such a dangerous condition.
Right. Did they end up fixing all the stoves, by the way?
They said they did.
Okay, so you are allowed to say what the total settlement was for, are you not?
We are.
How much was that?
$19.7 million.
Well, congratulations. And so that takes care of the lifetime care for both the children, et cetera, and hopefully everyone else in the apartment building has their stove at least brought up to some sort of safety standard.
And the word is hopefully. Lots of times this isn't done, and one of the reasons I'm really happy that we can do this show is I would like everybody watching this to check their own stoves in their own kitchens. This is a problem in every kitchen that doesn't have to be there.
And it's easy to check. You just open the oven door and you put some weight on it. If that stove starts tipping forward, then you've got to get that fixed. Of course, make sure there's nothing on it when you check it, but it's not hard.
Today we are fortunate to have with us your clients who, again, remain unnamed per the settlement agreement, so we're going to bring them on right now. It's my great pleasure to have these guests on our show. Welcome to our show.
Thank you.
Let's go back a few years when this accident first happened with your daughter. What was your initial reaction? She was burned over 75% of her body, right?
Yes. Yeah. I got a phone call because I wasn't at the place. I couldn't believe that they said her mom called me to tell me that she had suffered an accident, and she told me that she got burned.
Yeah.
She was crying, and I couldn't believe. I thought it was a little bit. When I got to the hospital, I ran to the hospital at the moment, and when I got to the hospital, I was shocked because the doctors told me that it was
serious.
It was something serious.
Yeah,
it was big, and it was bad.
Yeah. Now, you're a single dad now, correct?
Yes.
You have sole custody of your daughter, right?
Yes.
What is your day-to-day life like now, taking care of your daughter? And you do have help, correct?
Yes, I have. We recently had help.
Yeah.
But it's me pretty much all the time. It's hard at this point. I haven't been able to get back on track, so to speak, and to do my daily stuff. I'm always watching over her.
Yeah, and she's your only child,
She's
correct?
my only daughter.
Yeah, she's 12 years old now, correct?
She's 12 years old.
Happened when she was 4?
She was 4.5, yes,
Okay.
when that
What-
happened.
But why you work, correct?
I'm trying to work. I'm trying to accommodate my schedule
Yeah,
with her needs,
right.
but it's not easy. It's not easy. We have to, even with the help that we have a babysitter, but even so, it's not enough sometimes.
Right.
She only works at night. During the daytime, and after that, it's just me and her. And since the accident, she has special needs as well.
Right.
So it's been hard for her. It's not easy, but I'm willing to do it, and I'm always there for her.
Well, you know what they say, God never gives you any challenges you can't handle, right?
Exactly, yes. That's the way I think, to
Yes.
get ahead.
What are the biggest challenges taking care of your daughter today?
Well, she's growing. She's growing, and like I just said, she has special needs. She's going to special education school.
She goes to school.
Yes, and she's becoming a teenager. And it's hard for me to handle her needs. She's growing. She's becoming a girl. She's all that stuff. It's hard.
It's a big responsibility.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
This case took about 3 years, and your lawyers did a fantastic job.
Yes, they did a some great job for her.
Right.
I appreciate them.
Nana,
Hi, Mama.
can we see Brianna? I was there.
When we're done, yes.
Okay. What do you, for everybody out there who has a stove that they should check and see whether it's attached to the wall?
Can we see Brianna?
When we're done, yes. Yes.
What warning do you send to other parents out there?
Yeah. I hope that this helps other families, for them not to suffer or go through the same thing that my daughter went through. She's a survivor, basically, because she almost died at the hospital.
Yeah.
And I hope this helps families. They have to make sure that where they live is a safe living place.
Yeah.
They have to check a lot of things from where they live, so that they don't suffer the same consequences.
Do you want to say anything to the audience? You don't? Okay. Well, I want to thank you for coming here today, and I want to thank your dad for bringing you. And you're a brave girl. You went through a lot, and we wish you much success in the future. Okay?
I'm not brave.
Okay. Well, braver than me. And thank you very much for being here. Okay? Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Let me ask you this. You have a lot of people that call you all the time with their problems. How do you end up selecting the cases that you finally really become engaged with?
A couple of things, Steve. First of all, we have to believe that our clients are telling us the truth about what happened. And we have to like and bond with our clients. But most importantly, we have to feel that by the end of the day, when the case is over, that we've made a difference and that we could protect the community by what we've done in the case. With the stove case, we fell in love with these children, and we weren't able to undo what happened. We couldn't get them back to how they were before this terrible thing happened. But we knew that we could, if we got the word out, we could prevent this from happening to other children and other grandmothers and other kitchens.
These accidents are still happening today, aren't they? Thousands and millions of stoves out there, right?
There are.
Well, I want to thank both of you for being on our show, because this is an important case. We want to get the word out to prevent other accidents like that, or if people are in the same circumstances, they know who to go to, because you guys have been through hell and back and making sure that the manufacturers and the property owners and the building supervisors pay for what they are responsible for, right?
That's correct.
Thank you again for being on our program.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at InsiderExclusive.com.